Do you ever find yourself feeling like you're spending a lot of time doing things that don't really matter or aren't really moving the needle, and that as a result of that, you don't feel like you're making the progress that you feel that you should be making? Understanding the 80/20 rule can help us prevent this and can help us get more done in less time. But what is the 80/20 rule? The 80/20 rule, which is also known as the Pareto principle, was named after an Italian economist named Alfred Pareto. He discovered in the early 1900s that 80% of the land was owned by 20% of the people. Now, what started out as a very specific discovery went on to be applied to pretty much any area of life. So, for example, in a business, 80% of the revenue can be generated by 20% of the marketing campaigns, or 80% of the sales can be made by 20% of the sales people. Or 80% of the revenue can come from 20% of the clients. On a more personal level, you might find that 80% of your relationship problems are caused by 20% of people, or as far as your productivity is concerned, you might find that 80% of your outputs are generated by 20% of your inputs. Now, the 80/20 rule is not an exact formula. It doesn't have to be 80/20. It can be 70/30, it can be 90/10, it can be 50/1, it can be 42, it can be 99/1. The important thing is that we understand this principle, we understand that it is real, and we use it for us instead of it being used against us. And also, it's important to understand that this is a real principle, and that way we can accept it instead of fight it. In this book called The 80/20 Principle by Richard Koch, he has a quote that I love. He goes, "God plays dice with the universe, but they're loaded dice, and the main objective is to find out by what rules they were loaded and how we can use them for our own ends." The 80/20 rule is one of these rules. Now, the cool thing about the 80/20 rule is that it literally applies to pretty much any area of your life. So, for example, what 20% of activities are responsible for 80% of your profits? Or what 20% of activities are responsible for 80% of your fitness results? Or what 20% of activities are responsible for the 80% of improvements in the quality of your relationships? And even cooler is that you can turn this on its head and find the negatives as well. So, for example, what are the 20% of activities that are responsible for 80% of the costs? Or what are the 20% of activities that are responsible for 80% of your fitness setbacks? Or what are the 20% of activities that are responsible for 80% of your relationship problems? Being able to pinpoint the good and the bad, as well as the primary reasons for those things, can be a huge asset. Now, the 80/20 rule can be counterintuitive because we often associate success and results with long hours and hyperactivity. But as Richard Koch so eloquently states in his book, the way to create something great is to create something simple. Progress requires simplicity, and simplicity requires ruthlessness. In other words, according to Richard Koch, we must be ruthless about saying no to the 80% so that we can say yes to the 20%. Now, this is the part of the video where I normally give you action steps to start implementing the concept that we have been talking about. And normally I give you 5 or 7 or so, but in this video, I really just want to give you one, and that is to observe the 80/20 rule everywhere you go. Observe it in your own life, observe it in the lives of those you love, observe it in the lives of celebrities, observe it in society, observe it in your business, observe it in the businesses that you walk into, observe it at sports games. There's a really cool book also called 80/20, but this one's called 80/20 Sales and Marketing. And in this book, there's a really cool statistic that says that 50% of the revenue that sports teams generate is generated by 1% of the clients. So when we're sitting at a sports stadium, we might look around and we might think, well, of course they have all this money. Look at all these people that are buying the tickets. But in reality, 50% of their revenue is generated by just 1% of their clientele, because that 1% wants the full experience. They want the best tickets, they want the best seats, they want the best experience, they want the best entertainment, and so on and so forth. So knowing things like that, you can walk into places and start thinking, this restaurant, what are the 20% of meals that are responsible for 80% of the revenue? Or what is the 20% of things that are responsible for 80% of the costs? How much is the rent in this place? Or you can start looking at it more from a personal standpoint in your own life. For example, as far as your productivity is concerned, you can start thinking about what are the 80% of activities that only create 20% of my results. Can I get rid of those activities? If I can't get rid of those activities, can I delegate them to somebody else so that I can focus on the 20% of our activities that are the highest use of my time. As far as your personal life is concerned, one of the action steps that I give in almost every single one of my videos is, and it's usually the number one action step, is to surround yourself with positive people. The reason I say this is because the quality of your life is most affected, in my opinion, by the quality of the people that you have in your life. And so you can use this 80-20 principle to identify two things. One, who are the 20% of people that are responsible for 80% of my happiness, my joy, my genuine deep conversations, and who are the 20% of people that are responsible for 80% of my headaches. And then once you identify that 20% that's responsible for 80% of your headaches, you can either remove them or edit the relationship with them. And it's usually a handful of people, it's usually one or two, that you just kind of have to really edit that relationship so that your quality of life won't be impaired. And then you can identify the 20% of people that are responsible for 80% of the good conversations and the joy that people are bringing into your life. And again, it's usually one or two people, maybe 3 or 4 or 5, but in a group, it's usually going to be a small percentage of people that are responsible for the good vibes in your life, and it's going to be 20% of the people that are responsible for the bad vibes. And being able to identify those people, we can handle that accordingly. Now, all of that doesn't just affect the quality of your life, it also affects your productivity as well, because if the quality of your life is low, your productivity is also going to be low. And if the quality of your life is high, you give yourself a much better chance for your productivity to also be high. And if you're sitting there and you're thinking about the 80-20 rule, and you're thinking about the activities, the 80% of activities that you're going to try to remove or delegate, or the 20% of activities that you want to focus more on, but at the same time you're thinking to yourself, well, I still struggle when I sit down at my desk, I struggle to focus on my work and I keep getting distracted. If that is you, I made a video that you can click on right here called 7 ways to stay focused and avoid distractions. And as always, if you like this content and would like to see more of it, feel free to click on the link below in the description, check out and sign up for my weekly email newsletter, where I send you content like this every Monday via email to get you started for the week. Other than that, I'll see you in the next